Have you ever wondered why the people who despise you the most seem obsessed with you? It's not about you, it's about them and their shadows. Hatred is one of the most misunderstood forces in human experience. On the surface, it appears directed at someone else, aimed outward, an accusation, a punishment, a declaration of opposition. Yet, if we look closer, we discover that hatred is rarely about the person it targets. It is a mirror held up to the self, reflecting the turmoil, fear, and rejection a person refuses to face within themselves. When someone lashes out, scorns, or despises another, they are, in truth, wrestling with shadows they do not yet recognize. Every act of hatred carries a hidden story, an unacknowledged fragment of the psyche screaming for attention. It is not random, nor is it always logical. Hatred often springs from envy, insecurity, or self-loathing. When someone reacts with extreme hostility toward another, it is because the qualities they see in that other person, strength, confidence, authenticity, highlight what they themselves have denied, abandoned, or suppressed. The more intense the reaction, the deeper the inner conflict. Their attacks are a distorted form of self-recognition, a desperate attempt to displace the pain they cannot tolerate onto an external target. Consider the human mind as a house with rooms some dare not enter. In those rooms lie fears, desires, and traits deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or shameful. When left unexplored, these rooms do not remain empty, they fester. The shadows within grow restless, seeking expression. And the safest, most convenient outlet is projection, the act of seeing one's own unacknowledged traits in someone else and responding as if the fault belongs to them. In this way, hatred is never truly innocent. It is a dialogue with one's own unclaimed self, enacted externally to avoid internal confrontation. Hatred also often disguises itself as moral superiority or righteous indignation. When a person condemns another harshly, claiming virtue as a shield, it is usually a defense mechanism against noticing the ways in which they fall short of their own ideals. The very qualities they attack in others' arrogance, cruelty, ambition, freedom are the qualities that, if fully acknowledged within themselves, would demand confrontation and growth. Thus, their hostility is a psychological smokescreen obscuring the reality, that their judgment is first of all a reflection of their internal struggle. This inner struggle is often unconscious. Few realize how much of their emotional intensity is a dialogue with their own shadow. The more unconscious the shadow, the more violent the projection. A person who denies their anger may explode at minor provocations, while someone who suppresses their envy may become obsessively critical of others who seem to embody what they lack. The shadows that lie unrecognized inside are the ghosts that haunt their waking interactions. Hatred, therefore, becomes a map of unhealed wounds, a guide to the corners of the psyche that have been ignored. The psychology of hatred reveals a profound paradox. The very act of despising another is an admission of inner weakness. Hatred consumes the hater, keeping them trapped in a loop of obsession, rumination, and resentment. Yet, for those willing to look beneath the surface, it is also an opportunity. When we recognize that hatred is a mirror, we can learn to observe it without personal offense, to see the fear and pain behind the aggression. It allows us to differentiate between the external storm and the internal reality of the one who lashes out, understanding that their hostility is less a measure of our value than a measure of their own unhealed self. In relationships, communities, and societies, this principle is vital. Hatred often escalates when left unchecked, creating cycles of retaliation and misunderstanding. Understanding its origin within the human psyche can transform the way we engage with those who seem to oppose us. We begin to see that resistance, aggression, and malice are rarely attacks upon our being. They are signals of a psychological imbalance, of struggles that have nothing to do with us directly. Every act of hatred is a doorway into understanding the human condition, our fears, our shadows, and our capacity for projection. Recognizing hatred as a mirror does not excuse destructive behavior, nor does it require passivity in the face of harm. It offers clarity, a comprehension that beneath every malicious act lies a fractured soul, a consciousness grappling with its own darkness. When hatred is approached in this light, it transforms from a source of despair into a source of insight. It illuminates the parts of ourselves and others that remain unseen, revealing the universal truth that the greatest battles are not waged between people, but within them, in the uncharted territory of their own psyche. Every human being carries a shadow. It is a part of us that is often unrecognized, hidden, or denied, a collection of traits, impulses, fears, and desires that society, upbringing, or personal morality has taught us to reject. The shadow is not evil by nature, nor is it shameful. It is simply the part of ourselves that we cannot yet reconcile with our conscious identity. To ignore it is to live a fragmented life. To confront it is to begin the lifelong process of integration, healing, and self-mastery. Shadow work is not optional, it is universal. From the earliest moments of consciousness, we learn what is acceptable and what is not. Some impulses are rewarded, others punished. Some desires are nurtured, others shamed. Over time, we bury these disowned parts, lock them away in the recesses of the psyche, and continue forward with an incomplete map of who we truly are. Yet the shadow does not vanish. It simmers beneath the surface, influencing behavior, relationships, and decisions in ways we rarely perceive. Anger that feels out proportion, jealousy that surprises us, fears we cannot explain. These are all echoes of the shadow seeking recognition. Shadow work begins with awareness. To confront the shadow, we must first notice its presence in our daily life. It is expressed in projections, the ways we see others' flaws so clearly while overlooking our own. It is expressed in compulsions, habits, or judgments that seem to come from nowhere. When we recognize these patterns, we realize that the qualities we despise or fear in others are often reflections of what we have disowned in ourselves. Shadow work requires courage because it demands that we face what we have been conditioned to avoid. The universality of shadow work lies in the fact that every human has these hidden layers. No one is exempt. A person of power, wealth, or status is as shadowed as someone in humble circumstances. The more socially conditioned a person is, the more elaborate the defenses around their shadow. Some shadows manifest as aggression, others as withdrawal. Some appear in arrogance, some in self-sabotage. Forms vary, but the underlying principle remains the same. Each person is incomplete until the shadow is acknowledged, integrated, and transformed. Shadow work is also a moral and spiritual necessity. Without it, the traits we repress can erupt uncontrollably, often in ways that harm ourselves or others. We see this in moments of anger, addiction, or cruelty times, when the hidden self breaks through the veneer of consciousness. The more we ignore these inner truths, the more destructive they become, not because the shadow is inherently destructive, but because it is denied and therefore unchanneled. Consciously engaging with the shadow allows us to redirect its energy, transforming suppressed anger into motivation, hidden fear into caution, and unacknowledged desire into creative expression. The process of shadow work is deeply personal but also profoundly universal. While the manifestations differ, journey is similar for everyone: acknowledgement, confrontation, understanding, and integration. It requires honesty, introspection, and the willingness to meet oneself fully, including the parts we would rather hide. It often involves facing uncomfortable truths, experiencing guilt, regret, or shame, and learning to hold these emotions without judgment. In doing so, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and a more authentic relationship with the world. Shadow work is also essential for understanding human relationships. The traits we deny in ourselves are often the ones we most react to in others. A judgmental friend, a hostile coworker, a jealous partner. These relationships become mirrors reflecting parts of our own psyche that we have yet to claim. By engaging with our shadow, we not only gain insight into ourselves, but also cultivate empathy and understanding toward others. We begin to recognize that the flaws we perceive in the world are, in large part, a reflection of the unhealed shadows within ourselves. Importantly, shadow work is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing, lifelong process. As we grow, evolve, and encounter new challenges, new aspects of the shadow emerge. Each stage of life reveals additional layers, deeper fears, and hidden desires. This universality means that no matter how enlightened or self-aware we believe ourselves to be, there's always more to uncover. Every human, at every stage, is invited to confront, integrate, and transform their shadow. Shadow work, when embraced, transforms life from reactive to conscious. It allows us to act with intention rather than compulsion. It allows us to see the projections of others without taking them personally. It allows us to understand the universal patterns of human behavior without becoming trapped in judgment or resentment. By engaging with our shadows, we access a richer, fuller experience of life, one that is grounded not in denial but in wholeness. Resistance is one of the most revealing experiences in human life. It manifests in tension, hesitation, avoidance, or outright opposition, and it often feels uncomfortable or even threatening. Yet resistance is not a sign that something is wrong or that we are failing. It is a signal. It is a marker pointing directly to the areas within ourselves that require attention, understanding, and confrontation. Every moment we encounter resistance, whether from the world, from others, or from within ourselves, contains a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. The first form of resistance is internal. We resist change, growth, or self-exploration because it threatens the familiar structures of our psyche. The mind clings to patterns and routines, even when they are harmful or limiting, because familiarity offers a false sense of security. We may feel drawn towards certain actions, opportunities, or self-realizations, yet simultaneously recoil. That recoil is resistance. It is the voice of the unconscious guarding the unknown, reminding us that transformation is never simple and always demands courage. The truth behind resistance is that it points to the boundary between what is known and what is emerging within us. External resistance often comes from others or the environment. Criticism, opposition, or conflict can feel like obstacles, but they frequently serve as mirrors. When someone reacts strongly against our ideas, our choices, or our way of being, it is rarely only about them. It is about the collision of their shadow with our authentic presence. Resistance from others often exposes the truths we are attempting to embody, but have not fully recognized. The more we encounter opposition, the clearer it becomes which aspects of ourselves we are suppressing, which desires we are denying, and which fears we are avoiding. Resistance is also a measure of authenticity. The more a path or choice resonates with our deeper self, the more likely it is to provoke inner and outer resistance. Growth is rarely easy because it demands the integration of truths that challenge our comfort zones. The mind, the ego, and even the body resist change because they are accustomed to repetition, predictability, and control. When we notice resistance arising, it often signals that we are on the threshold of a revelation, a necessary confrontation with our own limitations, assumptions, or illusions. Psychologically, resistance reveals the parts of ourselves we have not yet reconciled. Every avoidance, every fear, every moment of procrastination is a symptom of an internal truth we are unwilling to face. The shadow, with its suppressed desires, unresolved fears, and hidden impulses, often expresses itself as resistance. The more unconscious the material, the more persistent and intense the resistance. By observing where we feel blocked, irritated, or hesitant, we begin to identify the unacknowledged aspects of our psyche. Resistance is, in this sense, a guide rather than an obstacle, a natural compass, pointing toward the areas of life and selfhood that require conscious attention. Spiritually, resistance is also a test of commitment. The challenges we encounter are not random. They are invitations to step into deeper awareness and alignment. The path of least resistance rarely leads to meaningful transformation. It is the friction, the tension, and the discomfort that reveal the substance of our inner work. By confronting resistance rather than avoiding it, we cultivate discernment, strength, and self-knowledge. The act of meeting resistance directly transforms it from a source of frustration into a teacher, revealing the underlying truths we might otherwise overlook. resistance also clarifies priorities and values. When we feel blocked or challenged, we are forced to question what truly matters. Some battles are worth engaging, while others reveal that our attachment, fear, or ego is driving the struggle. Resistance, therefore, is both a diagnostic tool and a filter, separating what is essential from what is trivial, illuminating the terrain of the psyche with precision and honesty. In relationships and social contexts, resistance can reveal unspoken dynamics, hidden agendas, and unconscious patterns. Conflicts often arise not because of explicit differences, but because each individual is resisting parts of themselves projected onto the other. By observing resistance in interactions, we gain insight into the psychological and emotional currents beneath surface behaviors. Resistance, in this way, is a map of truth, highlighting the unseen forces that shape choices, reactions. Ultimately, resistance is inseparable from growth, is not an adversary to be defeated, but a companion in the journey of self-discovery. The moments that provoke tension, discomfort, or avoidance are often the very moments that carry the richest lessons. Resistance shines a light on what we have hidden, what we have feared, and what we have not yet understood. It reminds us that truth is rarely effortless, and that the psyche communicates in subtle, persistent ways, guiding us toward what must be faced. Integrated and known compassion is one of the most underestimated forces in human life. It is often mistaken for weakness, for passivity, or for indulgence, but in truth, it is one of the strongest tools we possess for confronting the darkness in ourselves and others. Darkness, in this context, is not only the cruelty or hostility we encounter in the world, it is also the fear, pain, and shadow within every human being. To meet darkness with anger or retaliation only perpetuates it, but to meet it with compassion transforms it, dissolving the tension and opening a path toward understanding and healing. The first step in understanding compassion is recognizing that darkness is universal. Every human harbors fears, unresolved pain, and impulses they deny. Hatred, cruelty, and resentment do not arise from nowhere. They are expressions of inner suffering. When someone lashes out or acts destructively, it is rarely purely a reflection of the world. It is a reflection of their unhealed self. Compassion allows us to perceive this truth without condoning the behavior. It is the ability to see the suffering behind the action, the fear behind the aggression, and the shadow behind the projection. Compassion requires awareness. To respond compassionately, we must first observe the layers of darkness without judgment. This is not an easy task. The instinctive response to hostility is often defensive, fight, flee, or freeze. Yet these reactions rarely resolve the conflict or address the root cause. By choosing to pause, to breathe, and to look beneath the surface, we discover that the person acting in darkness is often trapped in their own internal struggle. Their words, actions, and attitudes are messages from their unconscious, revealing the pain they have not yet confronted. When we respond with compassion, we do more than soften the external conflict. We change the dynamics of the interaction entirely. Aggression meets aggression, and the cycle continues, escalating into further pain. Compassion, however, interrupts this cycle. It disarms hostility by refusing to meet it on its own terms, refusing to play into the patterns of fear and reactivity. Instead, it creates a space where understanding can emerge. The act of compassion is an acknowledgement of shared humanity, a recognition that every person carries darkness, and that this darkness can be illuminated through empathy and awareness. Compassion is also a mirror. By practicing compassion toward others, we train ourselves to see our own shadows with the same clarity. The traits we resist, the impulses we judge in others, are often the very ones we deny in ourselves. When we respond to darkness with empathy rather than blame, we cultivate self-awareness. We begin to understand the ways in which our own fears, insecurities, and unacknowledged desires shape our perceptions and reactions In this sense, compassion is both outward-looking and inward-looking, a tool for understanding the self and the other simultaneously. It is important to note that compassion does not mean tolerance for abuse or passivity in the face of harm. True compassion recognizes boundaries and asserts them firmly when necessary. It does not excuse destructive behavior, but it refuses to feed it with hatred or resentment. This balance of firmness and empathy is what gives compassion its power. It is not a weak surrender. It is a conscious choice to engage with darkness in a way that transforms energy rather than amplifies it. In relationships, compassion is transformative. Consider the dynamics of conflict, whether in families, workplaces, or communities. When anger and hostility dominate, interactions become battlegrounds, each participant reinforcing the other's pain. Introducing compassion into this space shifts the energy. It opens the possibility for dialogue, understanding, and resolution. It invites both parties to see beyond surface behavior to the underlying motivations, fears, and unhealed wounds. By refusing to react with judgment, we create an environment where darkness can be recognized and addressed rather than hidden or projected. On a personal level, compassion disarms the darkness within ourselves. We all carry parts of the shadow that we resist acknowledging: anger, envy, guilt, shame, or fear. By practicing self-compassion, we allow these aspects of ourselves to be seen without condemnation. This internal compassion diminishes internal conflict, reduces self-sabotage, and fosters integration. The more we accept and understand our own darkness, the less power it has to control our actions and emotions. Compassion is also a form of strength because it transforms energy. Anger, resentment, and fear are reactive, chaotic, and consuming. Compassion channels these energies into understanding, awareness, and healing. It is not passive, it is a conscious act of alchemy, turning the lead of conflict and pain into the gold of insight and connection. In every interaction where darkness appears, compassion offers the opportunity to meet it with clarity, to see the human story behind the behavior, and to respond in a way that fosters growth. Understanding and transformation mastery is often misunderstood as a collection of skills, achievements, or external accomplishments. People measure it in wealth, status, or influence, believing that these outward markers define one's competence and power. Yet true mastery is not first cultivated in the world, it is cultivated within. It is the product of deliberate self-reflection, the continuous observation, understanding of one's own thoughts, emotions, impulses, and behaviors. Without this inner work, outward success is fragile, fleeting, and often misaligned with one's authentic self. Self-reflection is the process of looking inward without judgment, of examining the hidden layers of the psyche with honesty and curiosity. It involves acknowledging both the strengths we admire and the traits we fear or resist. The ego tends to celebrate victories and hide failures, presenting a polished version of the self to the world. True mastery requires us to see beyond the ego's mask, to confront the aspects of ourselves that are uncomfortable, unwanted, or suppressed. These are the shadows, the impulses, fears, and unresolved conflicts that shape our actions, whether we recognize them or not. Mastery begins when we stop running from these shadows and start engaging with them consciously. Reflection requires courage because it demands that we face truths we might prefer to avoid. It asks us to observe our own mistakes, insecurities, and biases without turning away. Every act of avoidance is an opportunity missed. Every projection onto others a sign that something within us needs attention. The practice of self-reflection transforms these moments into insight. When we pause to ask, why did I react this way? Or what am I resisting in myself? We activate the internal processes that lead to awareness and growth. Over time, this deepened understanding becomes a foundation upon which true mastery is built. Self-reflection also fosters emotional intelligence, which is inseparable from mastery. By observing our emotional responses, we begin to understand the unconscious drivers behind them. Anger, envy, fear, and shame are not random. They are signals from the psyche pointing to areas that require attention. By acknowledging these emotions without judgment, we learn to navigate them with clarity rather than react impulsively. This clarity allows us to act in alignment with our values, to respond to challenges with measured intent rather than blind impulse, and to cultivate relationships with authenticity and empathy. Mastery through self-reflection is also a form of liberation. Most people live on autopilot, reacting to circumstances, social pressure, and external expectations without awareness of their inner processes. Their behaviors dictated by habits, conditioned responses, and unresolved inner conflicts. Self-reflection interrupts this automaticity, creating a space in which conscious choice becomes possible. By observing our patterns, we gain the ability to change them. By recognizing our projections, we gain the ability to see others clearly. By understanding our motivations, we gain the power to act with intention rather than compulsion. Another critical aspect of self-reflection is its role in confronting the shadow. The shadow contains the traits we reject, suppress, or deny, qualities that are often projected onto others. Without reflection, these aspects of the self remain hidden, influencing behavior in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. Mastery requires integrating the shadow, acknowledging it without judgment, and transforming it into a source of insight and strength. This integration is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process, continuous dialogue between the conscious mind and the unconscious, between what we are aware of and what we have yet to explore. Self-reflection also cultivates resilience. By understanding our internal landscape, we learn to navigate challenges with equanimity. External circumstances may fluctuate, people may act unpredictably, and life may present hardship. But those who have cultivated mastery through self-reflection possess an internal compass. They can pause, observe, and choose their response rather than react out of fear, anger, or habit. This capacity to navigate life with awareness is what differentiates true mastery from superficial competence. Finally, mastery comes from recognizing that self-reflection is not about perfection, but about presence. It is not a practice designed to eliminate flaws, but to illuminate them, to understand their origin, and to work consciously with them. The more we observe ourselves, the more we see the connections between thought, emotion, and action. The more we understand ourselves, the more we can act with integrity, authenticity, and power. Mastery is not a destination. It is the ongoing cultivation of insight, the continuous engagement with the self, and the willingness to face every corner of the psyche with honesty and courage.